Glenn died today of COVID-19, in fact, at the age of 100. Her life spanned much of the great American century, and she had a front row seat the last time we did something truly great as a nation and were the envy of the world. She was born Annie Margaret Castor in Ohio in 1920, 6 months before women had the right to vote. As a little girl, she met a little boy named John Glenn. More on him later. She was a star athlete and musician who turned down a scholarship to Juilliard, and the only thing that ever got in her way was her way of saying things. Like her own father, she was one of the millions of Americans with a stutter. Hers was so severe, there was a time her parents wondered if she could ever live independently. In her later years, therapies and treatments for stuttering became part of her life's work for Americans. So did this guy. She married John Glenn at the height of World War II. That meant military life for her, as her husband, the hotshot pilot, went off to war, then did so again in Korea, earning 18 air medals along the way. And then, of course, the big prize, John Glenn selected as one of the Mercury 7. For Annie Glenn, that meant something she never sought: attention for herself, membership in the Astronauts' Wives Club, as it was called, the media pressure, the pressure to be perfect. It made overnight celebrities of all of them. The movie The Right Stuff showed us at least a portrayal of the Glenns at home.
There's so much work to do anyway. More tests, training, study.
What about after?
After hours, I'll run a lot.
For the record, the Glenns never liked that movie. The rest of Annie Glenn's story matches the history we saw pretty much. The White House, ticker tape parade, her husband's 4 terms in the U.S. Senate, a presidential run, and for good measure, one last trip into space. All the while, Annie Glenn was raising 2 kids and serving people at the NIH on boards and charities, and as adjunct professor of speech pathology after becoming an effective communicator herself.
I told everybody I have given him to our country for 55 years, and I was ready to take him back as mine.
It's true, Annie Glenn was married to a national treasure, and so was her husband, John. John and Annie Glenn were married for 73 years and 8 months. He was buried on their wedding anniversary back in 2016. While Annie Glenn never orbited the Earth, she made sure that the first man who did remained down to earth. She changed a lot of lives in the process during her own life. Again, Annie Glenn, gone at 100 years of age. That's our